Hello, this is Jahan Ara and you're watching another episode of In the Line of Wire. This week I flew to Lahore to interview some of the CEOs of the companies in Lahore. There is a small company, 20 people, generating sales of about $20 million and expected to grow to about $150 million during the next year. The CEO is a very modest man, but I managed to get him and I've interviewed him for In the Line of Wire. His name is Zafar Khan. He's the CEO of Sofizar. Welcome, Zafar.
I wanted to give you a little background about myself and Sofizar. So I started out I did my high school in Pakistan, in Aitchison, and then I went to Caltech. And I got a degree in electrical engineering, and I started working for a high performance computer company. It was a very interesting experience for me because, and I think it was kind of a formative experience for me because I graduated in the year 1992 when there was a recession, not as bad as the current recession. Probably I'll talk about that a little later, but it was after the Gulf War, and it was kind of a recession. There were very few job offers. I was very lucky to get offers from 3 companies, from a company called Oracle, which you probably all know, and another company called Xilinx. They make field programmable gateways. And the third company was this no-name company called Avalon Computers. So the other 2 companies were very large companies. And Avalon Computers, which was a sister company of this other compiler optimization company, fast compiler company called Green Hill Software, which is, by the way, still in existence. However, Avalon, when I started out, was a 6-person company. And I got very excited when I saw that because their technology was really fun, really interesting. And I thought, okay, it's only 6 people. I'll grow with the company and it's going to be wonderful. And I worked very, very hard in that company, extremely hard, literally 18-hour days for months at a time. But 2 years later, when I finally decided to leave, it was a 4-person company. So, it was a very interesting experience because I got to see how a very tiny company makes ends meet in coming out of a recession times, and how it barely survives or it's on the verge of non-survival, and there are no safety nets. It's like you're walking on this tightrope and there is no net at the bottom. You better not make a mistake. And it's the whole company. And it's someone who's right out of college and who's not trained for this whole managing. So it kind of taught me to be a lot more self-reliant, that I have to watch out for myself because making a mistake is probably okay in some ways, but it may mean the death of the company. Of course, there can be a rebirth later on, but cash flow management and company being relatively conservative in running the company is kind of important. So later on,
what about technology? Did you have a lot of learning in terms of?
Oh, absolutely. Working for a small company was such a wonderful experience. I mean, and this I can say only it's after 17 years or something of hindsight. Because at the time it was very, very difficult. It was a very steep learning curve, and one of the cool things about that company was, one of the many cool things about that company was that they gave you the whole project. I had to design a board which was going into a VAX system. So they had this fun term called Vaxcelerator boards, so which accelerated the VAXes. And it was a brand new bus interface, and it was a brand new fast processor. What their business model was, every year they took the fastest processor on the market, they made an accelerator board which plugged into a VAX and took the compute bound jobs and put it on the on that board. So you had to write all the software and all the board design, including simulation. And since it was done for companies like for nuclear simulation or for Air Force modeling and all kind of compute bound things, we made only 40 boards or 30 boards. So there was we couldn't afford, the company could not afford process control.
Right.
So I had to even debug the board, like find out the board manufacturer's mistakes through following the lines and using a scope. It was, all this stuff was just, I mean, probably 10 years of education rolled into 2 years. So after that, well, I eventually I could not take it anymore, and I pretty much got all I could learn from that. And I worked in a consumer electronics company for 8 years, and in Pasadena, California, Boston. Then they sent me to Hong Kong. The company grew, by the way, a lot. I was employee number 16, and it grew to 3,500 people.
Wow.
And needless to say, and it was during the boom days, so I made 8-figure money. I made a lot of money.
Okay.
Which, by the way, I lost it all in the stock market, but that was okay. Great experience. And I got to see many countries, deal with all kind of manufacturers like Sony, Thomson Consumer Electronics, LG, Zenith, all kind of people. A lot of fun, a lot of interesting stuff. Got patents out of that. And after that, I came up with the idea, okay, enough of this, I'll start my own company. So I didn't want to particularly want to start a company. I had this great idea, and I wanted the company to buy into it. The company was called Gemstar TV Guide. So I wanted to have them buy into my idea, and a few friends also were big proponents of the idea. So we went to the CEO, and he was probably a wiser man than us, and he said, no, I don't think we want to get into this.
Okay.
And we really thought it was a great opportunity. Basically, what we knew was that 2006, all the US TV signals were going to go to from NTSC, which is the format, is the analog format, to digital format called ATSC.
Right.
So we wanted to make a ATSC converter box, so that all the existing TVs, we knew from consumer electronics how expensive TVs were, some of the higher end TVs. So we thought that these people would be able to use the converter box and basically still maintain the television and enjoy the signal rather than having to throw away, and we'd be the first ones on the market. And it was so good, that idea itself was so good that we got companies like Shanghai Broadcasting to sign up with us, and we said, hell with this company, we'll just do it ourselves.
Right.
So 5 of us alumni became alumni, because we jumped ship from Gemstar, and we started this company, and we were all Americans, but we were based out of perhaps Pakistani Americans. The rest were Chinese Americans. We started this company in Shanghai. It was very interesting, a lot of fun. We were very psyched, worked very hard, and we got money from Shanghai Broadcasting, 20%. But after we delivered our product, the reference design, basically the idea was to give them a reference design. We learned another lesson, a great lesson: how to collect money from the customers. Very difficult. We did everything, but they just wouldn't give us the money. And we had a written contract and everything, but every day they had a great excuse, like China is not going to let us convert money from renminbi to dollars. I'm like, just pay us in renminbi. Yeah. I'm like, just give us anything, just give us money. Unfortunately, they waited us out long enough that I pretty much could not take it anymore, and so I pretty much left. And later on, I moved to Pakistan, and in those days, the outsourcing was the great hot thing in Pakistan, and I was like, this is back in '04. So I said, well, I'll do it, and it just turned out that outsourcing was not for me. It was just, I mean, I really admire the people who can do outsourcing because they can handle a lot from the customers. And there's always that payment collection issue. There's a host of other issues, and it's just not fun. It's just not exciting for me. So, due to numerous reasons, we came into the space of we decided to, we found from some market research, in fact from our own needs, we found that having good analytics package on your site was very expensive. Right. Like a company called Urchin used to charge $800 a month for that. Okay. And we looked at it and we realized that there is great software, we didn't need all the features. Right. So I thought if we just made a scaled down version, which almost we needed ourselves, but we knew that many other people needed, because we, during outsourcing, during dealing with other companies, we knew what their needs were. Right. We thought if we just make this as a package, we'll just sell it as a software as a service product, and we should make good money. And we worked very hard on this product.
And how many people were there in the company at that time?
About 12. Okay. 12 of us. There were 12 of us, and worked very hard, very hard, in fact. And when the product was completed, it was in October of '05. We were beginning to start to market it, and it turned out that we heard from Google that Google, which had bought Urchin, made the $800 a month software free.
Oh,
it was just amazing for us that we worked so hard, and at the end of it, we have to compete with free. And a lot of people sometimes ask me that, well, Facebook competed with Google and the Google's Orkut and did better, but again, Facebook probably had something unique. Our goal was not to do something unique. Our goal was to do the most used functions at a low enough cost and have lots of people use it and still have it make a very tidy return for us. Right. So we knew our strengths and weaknesses in that sense. So the day it was one of those crazy executive decisions I had to take. When I saw that, the headline, and I verified that this is actually true, that very day I said, we're going to kill it. Right. And that was very hard for me to do, and it was very hard for my wife to understand that, for my team to understand that, my parents to understand that. It's one of the most difficult decisions I had to take, but I can tell you, it's one of the things I'm proud of, I guess. After so many years, I'm proud of the fact that despite all that, I was clear-headed enough to just kill it right there. And it's my advice to many entrepreneurs: if you see that you're going to die anyway, die fast. Okay, don't let it linger on. Do something else and then fast, move fast. So we said, okay, fine, Google, you did this to us. In fact, we know there's a lot of click fraud going on. Why don't we repackage the same software, add a few modules, and do click fraud detection? Because click fraud detection, and Google will never do its own click fraud detection. And if they do, they won't tell you. Right. But this will allow a lot of transparency to the actual advertiser. Right. And so we started doing that, and actually we completed that software too. But again, we knew that Google itself was doing click fraud detection, and we didn't want to have false positives. We didn't say, oh well, you got defrauded or whatever, when Google itself had corrected this. Right. So we wanted to find the cases that Google was not finding. So one of the things we did was we took just almost a random site. We took it and we looked at all the different patterns, the way fraud could happen, and we applied those patterns ourselves by running real ads. Okay. And just to see which ones Google catches and which one doesn't. So it was basically an experiment. So we were running these ads, but the product that we were selling was actually a real product.
Right.
So it turned out that other people started clicking on those ads and start buying stuff. So we got a very good kick out of it. We got a laugh out of it. That's great. Look at these guys. They're actually buying this stuff. We're just doing an experiment.
Right.
So we made a rule that, okay, any money we make from this will go into our restaurant fund. So the whole company will, and it was like a very trivial amount of money, like $90 we got. So like, great, let's just use the $90, like 5,000-6,000 rupees in those days. So let's just go to the restaurant and have a good time. So everyone liked the idea, that's great. But next month we made $450. And
then you started to think.
And like, what? That's at least some money. Okay. And then I'm like, wow, we know quite a lot about SEO. Why can't we just do it in SEO and don't even have to pay that much money? And let's do it. So when we started doing SEO, it jumped a game. And in those days, actually, this whole industry was relatively new.
Right.
So it was not that competitive. So no matter what we did, we just made more money. And after 2 or 3 months of this, when we were making $3,000-4,000 a month, I'm like, okay, well, that's some money. So far, we've not made any money. Let's just do more of this, and let's just put this other click fraud detection thing on a hold, and let's just do more of this. I want to build a little reserve, but it kind of making more money is always a good thing, in my opinion. So we just.
How his eyes light up. Right.
So we essentially just kind of moved away in that direction, and then we found that number one, the market was getting bigger. It was getting, there were a lot more consumers buying it, and it was getting more competitive, and it was getting more fun, and it was getting more challenging. So it was just great, and we just got so much into it, and we built relationships within the industry. And I started taking trips to the US and making friends with the CEOs of the companies and brokers who were selling these, and started expanding our kind of footprint from an inventory point of view. And it just kind of kept growing, and 6 months later or something, to me the whole web analysis and all that was just a distant memory, and I guess the software outsourcing was a distant and unpleasant memory. And alhamdulillah, we did very well. I just want to also mention about the MIT BAP program. Right. That was a very wonderful idea. Imran, Saeed, and there's actually a whole bunch of people who are responsible for bringing this to life. And we won that competition, but it actually opened a lot of doors for us after that.
We learned a lot 2 years ago, right?
This is it's in 07.
Right.
So by that time we were actually making like gobs of money, like fair amount of money. Right. But since we did that and we went to MIT and we met so many new people, we came up with so many ideas that it just grew a lot since then. The biggest concrete outcome of that was that I was introduced to an entrepreneur called Carlos Cashman. Right. And Carlos was from the search engine marketing space. So he's the guy who spends maybe $80,000-90,000 a day on buying keywords on Google, Yahoo, MSN, Ask, so on and so forth. He was that kind of industry, and he was already, his company was actually the fastest growing company with the fastest growth ever in the history of Boston. Right. And as you know, Boston with MIT and Harvard has produced lots and lots of great startups, Lotus, all kind of great companies, Data General and EMC, all kind of great companies. But his company actually was even faster growing than any of these companies, quite an achievement. And he sold his company for a 9-figure sum. lots of money from to Washington Post. So he was kind of almost free at the time, and he looked at our idea and he was like, wow, this is great. And so he formally became my partner a few months ago, and everything is going really well. And I'm not at a liberty to tell you the details as such, but we are signing up media partners, which are some of the largest media companies in the world. And if I were to tell you the names, you would definitely know them. Everyone in Pakistan knows those companies, but they're US companies, of course. And again, there's a very interesting opportunity. The newspapers in the world are in big trouble.
Right.
They can't monetize. Their internet advertising model is the way they used to do half-page ads and full-page ads in
Right.
1950s and 1960s. They have great assets, media assets, and they're basically selling it literally for tens of pennies on the dollar. They're very underutilized, and because of their lack of imagination in all this, they're firing very respected editors of their magazines, newspapers, journalists. They're cutting costs. They're shutting down left and right and center. So
They
we
have to
told
find
them,
a way out.
right, exactly. And when we made presentation about us, we basically told them that guys, we took an $8 domain, a domain that was just randomly picked, semi-randomly picked, just the best sounding domains out of millions of domains, paid $8 for it, and we make lots of money out of that, over $20 million a year out of that in sales. Imagine what we could do with your property, which is not an $8 domain. This is excellent domain. And they see our point, they see our numbers, they see our growth, they see our cost advantage that Pakistan has provided, and they're converts. It's very easy to convince them to do, and it's a rev share basis. We again don't want to be outsourcers. We want to sit on the same table, not be vendors, but be partners. Absolutely. Right. That's something I insist upon in all my businesses, that I work as a partner, not for someone, but with someone. Right. And so this is mostly I've talked about myself. I want to talk a little bit about Pakistan.
Yeah.
It is, most people, a lot of people in Pakistan have this attitude that let's go to some country in Europe or the US or Canada and we'll make a lot of money because we are undervalued here. And there our value will be, and some people call them economic immigrants, some people, there's nothing wrong with that. In some ways, at some point in my life, I was one of those people too. Mm-hmm. But at this point, there is an amazing opportunity in Pakistan right now. What we can do with our resources and with our ideas, and the fact that world is so flat and internet has made it so flat that you can sit right here in Lahore and do what a person in LA would do, or you can be in Karachi or in Islamabad or wherever, or I guess in Gujranwala if you get fast enough internet, and you can be competing on a head-to-head basis with a person in Boston. Right. And that is just so powerful, and I don't think people fully realize that. They are just selling themselves, a lot of people are selling themselves short by saying, well, let's not take a risk, let's just do it with someone and let someone else take the risk. It's a big opportunity. I mean, that's all I want to say. People who want to capitalize on it, there is again a window. This window may go, and it's not only in my space, there's a lot of other places. I mean, all this iPhone stuff is coming out. Now, Google is coming out with the Android 2 and so on and so forth. people are very hungry for applications. People are very hungry for new ideas, creativity, and what you can do. You can't really form a 50-person company in US without taking a lot of risk and successfully do the company only churn out iPhone apps.
Right.
You just won't be able to make the payroll.
Right.
Okay, but in Pakistan you can, and you can make very good. Basically, let's put it this way: if you make $200,000 a month in Pakistan,
that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
For the 50 people,
Yeah.
you probably won't pay them $4,000 each, right?
No.
Probably not. Although I'm sure those 50 people would love it if you do. But even, okay, so what happens is in US, 50 people, they will not work for $4,000 a month. They will just not work. It just won't work. But it will work here. And this kind of money is, people are doing it all the time. We know that. You just have to have enough hits, enough good stuff. You try many things, see which ones work best, and so on and so forth. So, this Pakistan just offers you a lot of opportunities. I mean, I know you talked to Dr. Umar Saif in a little while. I'm sure he'll tell you that he's come up with so many ideas, and mashallah, so many of them are successes in their space. There's no way, even with Dr. Umar's brains, his massive brain power, he could have done it in the US, just formed so many companies, come up with, the 1,000 flowers that bloom, and, even if 10 of them bloom, that's great. It's a great hit ratio. You can't do that in the US. So, I'm very bullish on Pakistan. I know you put it on the net sometimes, so if there are any entrepreneurs in the US watching, I think the big opportunities are right here in Pakistan. So,
tell us a little about the people who work for you.
Okay, so we have a very diverse group of people. I would say it's one of the probably if you look at the makeup of our people, you may at some point say we are not even a tech company. Because we have 50% of our people are content writers.
Okay.
A lot of them are mothers who work on their laptop from home. Okay, so we have 20 such people who work out of home. So out of 55, 20 are actually working out of home. And then we have about 8 or so pretty good software engineers. We have analysts, very smart ones from top MBA schools and also from some US universities. And then we have SEOs, and we basically trust only our internal people to be SEOs. So we basically have a training university, so to speak,
right,
for our own people, and we have them go through the paces, and we have a semi-rigorous program that they go through, and after 6 months we have them work on money producing sites. Before that we have them work on test sites and test stuff and so on and so forth, and do general help stuff. And so it's a very diverse and very interesting group of people, and I think it's needless to say we would not have been successful without the input of these excellent people that we have.
Any advice for any of the young people who are starting companies? Because there are quite a few of them who are starting their own
Yes, I mean, I think my main advice is that, especially if you are watching this from Pakistan, you guys are in the right country already. In the right place, right point in time, and in the right country. Just have to have the right mindset. Be a little bold with your decisions, but my old and I guess broken record advice: always watch your cash flow. Make sure that whatever you do will get you money, because success and all that is great, and adulation of the loving crowd and all that is all very good, but again, you have to meet your payroll, you have to keep your people happy, and that really is the ethical, right way of doing business, of providing reliable income on time to your people, to yourself, and absolutely.
You were going to talk about the recession, the current recession.
Yes, it really is a big one. It's I think a lot of people don't realize how big it is and how long it's going to be. I think we should be prepared for that, but I also want to make sure that people don't give up hope. The best companies in the world, some of the biggest companies, were recession children, were built in recession. When people, very smart people, could not find jobs, and these companies, I mean, I guess Motorola is one of those examples.
IBM is one of them.
Yeah, IBM, Motorola, these companies were started when they took a lot of smart people, came up with good ideas, they dogged it through the recession, and when it ended, they were the only ones left standing, and there was a wealth of opportunities available to them, and they were well positioned, and they took advantage of it. What is really difficult to do is form a company and have it be successful when everyone else is going after the same smart people, everyone is going after those same smart ideas or whatever it is, and this is what separates the men from the boys. Okay,
or the women from the girls.
Women from the girls, that's what I meant. So, to do it in recession, because if you do it now, you will be very, very well positioned later on in life. I mean, even take Google as an example. I mean, Google did not really start getting successful after the dot-com bust. If you think about it, it's the 2002 when you started hearing about Google. People used to get a good laugh about this whole Google business in 1999, I remember, when said, oh, this company wants to go IPO, and this is when we used to joke about all the crazy ideas that people would come up with and start to do IPO. And someone said, oh, this company wants to do an IPO, and their unique selling point is that they have a button which says, I feel lucky. And we got a good laugh. Oh my God, what will they come up with next? What a stupid idea. I feel lucky. I mean, can you believe that? And they think they can IPO from that. This is back in 99. Okay, no one, it was the butt of our jokes, right? And in 2001, when the whole thing crashed, Google just kept going, and they started hiring the best minds from these other companies that were going bust, and they were just growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And 02 and 03, they just, spiked.
Right.
And, that's just another great example. So, tough out of recession, and inshallah, we hope to see another IBM or Google or Motorola out of Pakistan.
So that was Zafar Khan, the CEO of Sofizar, and he spoke about the MIT Enterprise Forum business plan competition that they won, the things that he learned from it, and how since Sofizar participated in that competition, it has looked at its growth in a totally different way. So there is a lot happening in our ecosystem, a lot that people are doing to help companies grow. Zafar is also very positive about Pakistan and the ability for companies to do great things just because they are based here and nowhere else. Until next time, this is Jahan Ara signing off from another episode of In the Line of Wire.